Science owned.
Welcome to Nish Labs. It's here that we do a lot of the experiments that you at home, the viewers, get to see for yourselves. So let's take a look inside and see what's going on. In today's episode, we're going to talk about plants. Plants make up a huge portion of the world that we live in. They provide us with food, oxygen. Even the very atmosphere above our heads was made by plants hundreds of millions of years ago. Plants undergo a process called photosynthesis. That's when they take water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight, and perform a reaction to turn all of those into a simple sugar called glucose. This is the gigantic chloroplast diagram of science. This will allow us to see where photosynthesis takes place inside the cells. Come check it out. Now we all know that photosynthesis happens inside the leaves of plants, but where exactly does this reaction take place? Let's take a closer look. Over here we see a cross-section of a leaf. This shows us all the different cells involved in a plant's daily function. These are stomata. This is where the carbon dioxide enters the plant and the oxygen leaves the plant after photosynthesis has occurred. This is a vein. Now in most plants there are two types of veins, one called xylem and one called phloem. Xylem transports liquid materials such as water through the cells, and phloem transports solid nutrients. But if you look here, these are the mesophyll cells where photosynthesis takes place. This is what we're going to be looking at today. Over here, we see a whole mesophyll cell, and as you can see, there are many chloroplasts within this cell. Chloroplasts are the organelle within the cell that perform photosynthesis. An organelle is a small structure inside each cell that has a specific function. Chloroplast's specific function is performing photosynthesis. But let's take a closer look at chloroplasts. Over here we see a big chloroplast, and these are the different parts that are on the chloroplast. It's got an inner membrane, shown in yellow, an outer membrane, shown in orange, and several structures inside. These little stacks of round discs you see are called grana. Each individual stack inside of a grana, each little disc, is called a thylakoid. Thylakoid membranes are specifically where photosynthesis takes place.
Here's an experiment you can do at home to see how plants need light for photosynthesis and for their survival.
All you need are two plants about this size which you can get at your local garden supply store.
You put one in a shady area.
And you put one in a sunny area. After about a week or so, you'll see that the two plants are different in size because the one in the sunny area will have more sunlight and be able to conduct photosynthesis quickly and producing more food for itself. This is a plant that has been in the sunlight for the past week, and that is a plant that has been in the shade for the past week. Notice how the plant that has been in the sunlight is a little bit bigger than the one that has been in the shade because it had been able to perform more photosynthesis and making more food for itself.
Did you know that
Plants make rubber that we use to make gloves, tires, and paint. plants store chemical energy in their leaves. This video was cut together using Windows Movie Maker.
Now you know.
The entire point of photosynthesis is to make glucose, a simple sugar that the plant stores and uses for energy. Now, the process of making glucose is broken into two parts, the light reaction and the Calvin cycle. The light reaction happens in the thylakoid membrane. This is the gigantic thylakoid membrane diagram of science, and it's here where the light reaction takes place. These are photosystems 1 and 2. Photosystems are proteins inside the thylakoid membrane that have special pigments in them called chlorophyll. It's the job of chlorophyll to absorb certain wavelengths of light. Photosystem 2 has chlorophyll that can absorb light of wavelength of 680 nanometers. Photosystem 1 has chlorophyll that can absorb light of 700 nanometers. For these reasons, photosystem 2 is also called P680 and photosystem 1 is also called P700. This is the cytochrome complex. It is in the cytochrome complex that electrons get reduced to lower energy levels, and the extra energy is used to make more ATP. This is NADP plus reductase. When the electrons pass through this special protein, it reduces an NADP plus molecule and joins it with a hydrogen proton to make NADPH, which is one type of energy that is made from the light reaction as it goes towards the Calvin cycle. Okay, so first we're going to follow the pathway of the electrons. When water splits, two electrons are separated from the protons. The protons move into the thylakoid, and the electrons move through this specific pathway. First, the electrons go into photosystem 2, where when a photon hits it, a photon is a particle of light, the energy created raises the energy level of the electrons. Then the electrons, transported by an electron transporter called PQ, are joined with two protons in the thylakoid membrane to move the protons through the membrane into the thylakoid itself. Then, PQ takes these electrons to the cytochrome complex, where their energy levels are reduced, and the extra energy from this reaction is used to make more ATP. From there, the electrons are transported through another carrier called PC to photosystem 1, where their energy levels are again raised and moved by the electron carrier FD to NADP plus reductase. Here, the electrons are used to join NADP plus with a hydrogen molecule to make NADPH, which is one form of energy used in the Calvin cycle. Alright, so now we're going to follow the pathway of the protons. Now there are two ways the protons can enter the thylakoid. One way is when H2O is split, the electrons move through the electron pathway and the protons move into the thylakoid. The second way is when PQ brings protons in by combining two hydrogen ions with electrons to pass them through the membrane. Now once inside the thylakoid membrane, the protons move about, eventually passing through a protein called ATP synthase. When it exits, the energy from the moving proton is used to join the ADP molecule with a phosphate group and make ATP, another form of energy that goes into the Calvin cycle.
Yeah! Guess what, Norman? I just aced my bio pop quiz.
Wow, how'd you do?
I did great. It was so easy. There was like this question. When does the light reaction take place and when does the dark reaction take place? Everybody knows that the light reaction happened in the light and the dark reaction happened in the dark.
You dummy! The light reaction takes place in the light, but the dark reaction is actually not light dependent. It takes place both in day and the dark. Let's go ask Nishman. He knows everything.
Alright, now remember, photosynthesis happens in two phases, the light reaction and the Calvin cycle. This is the big Calvin cycle diagram of science. Now, it's important to remember
Nishman!
We need your help.
Well, what seems to be the problem?
Harry thinks that the dark reaction only happens at night. Is that true?
No, in fact I was just getting to that. See, even though the Calvin cycle is sometimes called the dark reaction, it's important to remember that it's not light dependent, meaning it happens in all hours during the day, not just at night. However, the light reaction does only happen when there's sunlight outside.
Thank you, Nishman.
So now, I'll take you through all the steps involved in the Calvin cycle. Okay. So as you can see on the diagram, carbon atoms are represented by these little green circles over here. and phosphate groups are represented by these little yellow circles with the letter P inside them. Now, you see that the Calvin cycle is in fact like this circle, with certain entrance and exit points. But it's important to remember that there is no definite start or stop point to the Calvin cycle. It's just this sort of continuous phase that keeps on going all day long. Alright, so for our purposes, we'll start in phase 1, the carbon fixation phase. During this phase, an enzyme known as rubisco attaches 3 carbon dioxide molecules to 3 simple 5-carbon sugars known as RUBP, or ribulose biphosphate, with 5 carbons and 2 phosphate groups. Now, when the 3 carbons are attached to the RUBP, they become this molecule over here, called 3-phosphoglycerate. 6 molecules with 3 carbon atoms and 1 phosphate group each. So now we enter phase 2, which is known as the reduction phase. During this phase, 6 molecules of ATP combine with these 6 molecules of phosphoglycerate to form this molecule over here. 6 molecules of biphosphoglycerate. Biphosphoglycerate. Can you say that word? Biphosphoglycerate. Then, from there, 6 NADP molecules are reduced to NADP+ to form this molecule over here, called G3P. 6 molecules of a 3-carbon atom with 1 phosphate. From here, one of these G3P molecules exits the cycle and goes on to form a sugar molecule, glucose, that the cell will store and use later on for energy. Now we move ourselves into phase 3, regeneration of CO2 acceptors. Left with 5 molecules of G3P, these 5 molecules combine with 3 phosphates from ATP to form the RUBP, the 3 molecules of RUBP that start the cycle over again. And from here, the cycle just continues as normal. Every time the cycle goes around, we get 1 molecule of sugar from all these carbon atoms. And yeah, there you have it. The big Calvin cycle diagram of science.
Yesterday, photosynthesis was easy, eh? Now it seems so very far away. I believe in yesterday. Suddenly, I'm not half the tree I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over me. Blind reaction returned to me. Why the light is gone, I don't know, I couldn't say. I said something wrong, I long for light of day.
So yeah, as you can see, plants are very important to us. They provide us with food, oxygen, and they build the atmosphere. And they taste good too. Well, Nishman, next time.